Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you all taking the time. Dreamforce is such a busy time of year to come out and talk about one of my favorite topics, which is cybersecurity on the Salesforce platform, which might not have a very exciting ring to it, but to me it's very near and dear to my heart. And I'll tell you why. This aforementioned Fortune 100 company that was mentioned had 100 orgs. And out of those 100 orgs, they hired a white hat hacker and went through, and 60 or so of them failed miserably. None of ours, thankfully, but that company then said, hey, we got to tighten all this stuff up. So over an 18-month period, I had the opportunity to work with their world-class SecOps, privacy teams, all their leadership to help them align on a global security policy and then roll that out to their 100 orgs. We personally ran about 30 of them through the process. After that, we said, hey, this is a really good opportunity to bring this kind of learning out to the public. So let me get into it. This is me. I do have LinkedIn, surprise. Happy to make a connection, so that QR code allegedly will take you there. As mentioned, those are my street cred. I don't have any slides about woodworking to show today, but if you want to catch up after, happy to. Since this is not the biggest crowd in the world, I'm going to have lots of time for questions, one-on-one. I'm happy to catch up. I try to make these presentations as broad and general as I can, but happy to dig into the weeds if you have some specifics after I go through it. I really want everyone here to have a little bit of value when they walk out. So hopefully there's some actionable stuff that you can take, or great start to some future conversations. And I'm happy to help any way that I can. I love this stuff. And again, MVP means I'm a member of the community. So I take a lot of this stuff as a community member first. I want to help. I want to bring value, help people be successful at Salesforce. And hey, yeah, I do a little bit of work on the side, but let's just all be friends and see where we can go. So where do I come in? This is what we call our Salesforce Ikigai. So, it's kind of your passions and what you're good at and what you like to do and what's good, and put it all together. We do a lot of Experience Cloud work, which if you have an Experience Cloud, you know that that's one of the most inherently troubling parts of the Salesforce platform for security. We're big on UX. UX and security actually go together in a really important way, because if your security isn't usable, then you're causing more problems than you're solving. We do a lot of employee apps, so complex business processes. Again, the more complex, the harder to secure. And then pure play security, red teams and so forth. So you're probably wondering, why is Garry here and not a Red Argyle person? And I'll tell you why. We have an awesome partnership with HIKE2. We've done cybersecurity projects together. We've done engineering projects together. I'm really grateful for HIKE2 to invite me here today, and just happy to share more about this stuff. So let's get into it. What is the weather? You might be surprised by what I'm about to show you, or if you're already in this space, you'll probably yawn. But there's some stuff going on right now in the world that's really interesting. I want to introduce a concept called shared responsibility model. We'll talk through that, and then we'll get into what do we do with all this information and how do we get our Salesforces where we want them to go. So, anybody here read about a cybersecurity incident in the past 24 hours? Let's go through. I made these slides last week, so let's see. We got huge data breach involving every social security number in the country. And what's interesting is this leaked out of a data broker, some no-name processing company that no one's ever heard of before. We got a Medicare breach, 1 million subscribers there. Golf course. Think about this. You're a golf course, and somehow they're getting targeted. You don't have to be a brand name to have a security profile that someone finds and takes your data. Snowflake, love them. They had the most rudimentary failures. Some of their customers literally had like a post-it note with the username and password and no MFA, and it just got taken. So there's just so much stuff going on right now. Class action lawsuits. It just goes on and on and on. And I don't ever want this to be you. I don't ever want it to be any of our customers. So I'm here to just hopefully shine some light on some of this stuff. Does anybody know the shared responsibility model? It's some real tech jargon that they bury way down in the documentation. And again, the Salesforce platform, I like to think of it as a Volvo. It's the safest car on the road. It has a huge reputation for being a safe, easy car to drive. But then guess what happens when you get your Volvo? Someone gives you the keys. And once you have the keys to that car, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to drive it safely in the lane, just like all those lifts are out there? Or are you going to do something crazy with it, like attach a bunch of balloons to it and try to turn it into a flying car and do something inherently unsafe? And that is the thing with Salesforce. The platform absolutely can be secured. What are people doing with it? Not always that. So I want to shine a little light on that, and we'll get into it. Anybody know all this alphabet soup here? This is just like the start of a litany of compliances. I wager every single Salesforce implementation in the US needs to have some kind of compliance requirements, whether it's CCPA, you're doing work in Europe, you've got GDPR. If you have any presence in New York and you're in banking or insurance, the CRR 500 is huge. We wrote a really detailed white paper on that. Happy to share. So how are we? Salesforce is now part of the challenge. We have complicated IT landscapes. Salesforce is just one part of it. A lot of times they're overlooked. So Salesforce is a proprietary platform. It doesn't have a security model like any other application. Unless your IT and tech teams are really working on managing and measuring Salesforce, they could be missing things in there. Is it forgotten? Does everyone in the government, in the leadership know that Salesforce is part of the platform and part of your attack surface? Inconsistent. How many people have only ever had one admin ever? So what are we going to do about this? First, rest easy. Again, the platform itself, we can get it there. It is not fundamentally flawed to the point that Salesforce can't be secured. It absolutely can be. And it's a journey, and we'll talk about the journey. Anyone here familiar with NIST framework? National Institute of Standards and Technology. I love NIST because it's 6 words long, this framework. So if you're going to learn one security framework to reference day in, day out, it's like your company values, and they say don't make it like 30 words, make it like 3, 4, 5, 6 words. NIST is like your security values, and it's something that you can really internalize when you're making business decisions and technical decisions. So look, there it is. 6 words. Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, govern. So what we want to do is help you think about Salesforce, oh, look at that, inside the NIST framework. Start aligning your processes with how it works with NIST. And it can suddenly shine a light on what do I need to do to make my Salesforce implementation more functional in these 6 dimensions. So we're going to break this down a little bit because this is the important stuff where usually I get out on the mic and I lower my voice, but I'm going to try to keep my outside voice for this venue. First thing is critical. You got to measure your attack surface. So do you have a small implementation or a big one? Do you have a lot of users or a little? Do you have a lot of different roles and profiles or one? Do you have a community or not? Do you have APIs exposed or not? You need to know kind of where you're starting from. The second thing is classify your data. There's actually platform functionality that lets you tag the metadata in your fields, so you can say, this is PII, this is SPII, these have to be dealt with in a certain way. But until you classify your data, you don't even know where to start with cybersecurity because you don't know what your risk is. You get all this stuff inventoried, and then a third party can often help with that. Hint, hint. A fresh set of eyes can often just really uncover a lot of stuff and do it really rapidly. There's a lot of tools out there. We have some tools. There's a couple other App Exchange products and so forth to help, but really getting that stuff under control is critical. Second part of the NIST framework, protect. Okay, we've identified all this risk. How are we going to protect it? How are we going to protect ourselves against these potential challenges? If you don't have MFA, obviously Salesforce enforces it now. There's still some ways to cheat your way through it for really adamant opponents, but MFA is paramount. SSO makes the MFA easy, so if you're able to incorporate that with your SSO, you're killing multiple birds with one stone because you're locking up your system with MFA. You're also baking in some inherent user management. You want the users who should use Salesforce to use it. When they leave the company, you want to remove their Salesforce access immediately. One huge gap I find all the time, oh, this person hasn't worked here for 18 months, but their Salesforce account's still active. We absolutely we can kill that problem with SSO. Is your sharing model up to date? Again, going through lots of admins, business changes, is the sharing model evolving with it and being audited periodically? If you have PII, SPII, anything, credit card, Social Security, health, I say Shield encryption is a requirement to be compliant in most cases. So I'll just put that out there. Shield is a suite of Salesforce security add-ons. The encryption layer will protect your data at the app level. And then finally, transaction security policy. You can really customize who and how and when and through what means can people access your data. So it's a great add-on. And actually, if you buy encryption, usually this comes along on the SKU. So it's a great way to just get more value out of Shield. The next thing is detect. Okay, you've got all this data you've identified, you've got it protected. How are you ever going to know if something's going on in your system? And I've seen this happen where things are leaking silently for years. And then we're like, did you know that was happening? So top of the list here, event monitoring. Again, if you have a SIEM in your organization, event monitoring can feed logs out to your SIEM, which is one of my first recommendations. The second one is, what's the human situation around your security? Is someone looking in and checking on things and looking at logs and checking reports periodically? The hard part is we're fallible. It's like guard duty. You know, if you had to go do guard duty right now, would you be able to stay awake all night? So I think of getting some robots and automations involved in your detection is critical. Next thing is red team testing. Not only does this can help you understand where your vulnerabilities are, you can use a red team to test your company's ability to detect and respond to an incident. I love that kind of secret shopping thing where one stakeholder hires us to do a red team test, and the internal team doesn't know, and we see what happens. Whether they call it out or not is always interesting. And then internal, just governance again. If something happens, how are you going to respond to it? I think notably policy is the foundation. Just, do you even have a communications plan? Have you ever practiced an incident response? If something's happening, do you have a way to stop the activity? Some people call it a kill switch. There's probably fancier names for it. And then again, event monitoring. How is it going to let you know that you've actually stopped the leak? And then what are you going to do after? Are you going to be able to recover from a suspected incident? So can you execute the policy? Do you have the ability to restore data? Are you going to run an event retrospective and put all that learning into action? And last but not least, govern, because govern kind of makes the whole thing work. You need leadership aligned to help you do all the stuff that's down below. Be willing to make a few investments in time, resources, thoughtfulness, staff training, all the rest. So you really want to have that top-down alignment and keep your staff trained. I work in tech. You know, most of the companies we work with are either fins or high tech, and it's amazing, like people in high tech, how ignorant you can be of security basics. So training is critical in the govern thought. So I do have one story. I'm really thankful. I have not had to remediate lots of security incidents, thankfully, because we're pretty aggressive with this stuff. I had one time. So this is kind of the company. They were like the Ferrari of security setup. They had good admins in place. They had governance. They had the technology. One day, everything's fine. The next day, they say, hey, our API in Salesforce is going crazy. Red Argyle, can you take a look? So we said, sure. We got one of our engineers in. First thing he did, went to event monitoring. He starts looking at the queries that were showing up in the logs. And it's really kind of a blurry screenshot, and I removed some stuff because it's secret. But this robot was going, give me everything that starts with a W. Give me everything that starts in an E. Give me everything that starts in an R. It was systematically going through the alphabet. And you can see right here, it was giving away 4,000 records every time a query came in. It was just leaking 4,000 records. And we were like, oh dear, we've lost 200 and something thousand records in the last 12 hours. What's going on? So here's the good news. Because we had the logs, we reconstructed the same attack that they were doing. And guess what we got back? A GUID. 4,000 GUIDs at a time. And if you know what a GUID is, they're useless. They're not related to anything. It's just it's a one-time kind of token. Doesn't make a difference. So we all breathed a collective sigh of relief and said, "Oh man, we really dodged a bullet there." But it's because we had these tools in place that we were able to avoid a major incident. This would have been front page news. It would have been a big black eye for us and the vendor and everyone involved. So thankfully, we had sufficient evidence to prove it wasn't an incident. And that's just for some of the basic, Salesforce stuff I talked about up above. So we did a retro after, and what do we learn? This is good, but let's tighten up transaction security. So instead of 4,000 records at a time, let's only do 25. So we shrunk that attack surface significantly. We made an automation, so if API usage goes up over a certain point, it starts emailing people. So we would know within the first couple queries that something's up. And we audited sharing rules like, okay, they got the GUID, it wasn't a problem. Let's make sure they don't even get a GUID when they do it again. So we're back to normal. And we all, again, that was a big load off, but it's because all those practices worked, and it wasn't rocket science to get to that point. So again, Salesforce can silently leak data for years, and it's invisible, but it does not have to be. And just a little bit of prep equals a pound of cure, or whatever the old saying is. Boy Scouts, be prepared, and it's imperative that we be prepared at this point. So I like to, again, I talked about the NIST framework up above. It's a great way to start aligning the high-level things. But then when you start saying, how am I really going to measure the detail? Depending on your industry, there are a lot of other more very specific frameworks. My personal favorite is CIS. It's Center for Information Security. I also like them because their headquarters is in my backyard. I'm like 20 minutes away from their world headquarters. SOC 2 is a US-centric standard for security, and then ISO 27001 is kind of the global version of that. The great thing is all the stuff that we talked about in NIST can be objectively aligned to these other frameworks. We have 263 controls in our audit library that we use to measure customers on where do you stand in regards to these frameworks. And what we want to do is give you a picture over time. I guarantee everyone here, no one's going to score a 100 on the security assessment test. There's always something to improve, but what we want to do is A, let you all understand where you're at right now, and then B, know where you can improve, and then prove that you're improving over time, and help prioritize your efforts. So you can do a lot of this yourself if you're sufficiently experienced and resourced, or that's where we can, happy to help out. So a couple areas, I talked about assessment. Governance is critical. You got to get your leadership aligned with these things. You can absolutely run an assessment yourselves. Got to have a plan. Just bake it into your ongoing strategy work. If you have other partners or working with Salesforce, tell them like this is important for you. Salesforce has a lot of resources as well that they can bring to the table. Then you actually have to do it, and then you have to measure your improvement. So it does take a bit of a commitment, but we do want to help lighten that load. And I want to say these aren't like massive, like all I can do this entire next 12 months is security. Security should be a part of the value that your organization is doing, but I think it goes hand in hand with organizational improvement. And a lot of times it does factor in really nicely. If you're in the middle of a transformation or another project, maybe we can budget for a little bit of security work along the sides just to help make that project go smoother, make sure that part of the implementation is secure, and help with some of the planning. So this is where we partner a lot with HIKE2. The top one here, advisory consulting. HIKE2 has a really great advisory team, which can really help on the governance side. I've worked with those folks, and they are absolutely fantastic and a lot of fun to work with. We have some of these risk and pen testing services where they're pretty micro, and they can just happen really quickly. Our assessment product, we've got it down about 2 weeks to get one of those objective assessments. And then, collectively, and HIKE2's got a huge engineering team to really help you all build or implement whatever you've got to do. Some things are easy. Some require a fair amount of finesse. Encryption is not just like check boxes and you're encrypted. It's, all right, first I got to identify what to encrypt. Now I need to validate, is there any dependencies? Is it going to break any APIs or queries? What type of encryption can we do? How are we going to manage our keys? All that stuff can get a little engineering heavy. We got all the skills to help with that. And then how do you measure over time? And I think the best path is you got to have multiple check-ins. It's not just like I did the security thing, I'm done forever. It's I did a security thing and I'm done for 2 quarters, and let's do a check-in and remeasure after that. So we are here to help. I'm here all as long as y'all want to talk about security, and I can go pretty long. I'm trying to keep on time today up here, but I'll happy to one-on-one consult, share ideas. All right, thank you. Thank you.